The NAACP and Mississippi Congressman Benny Thompson are suing former President Donald Trump. They allege that Trump incited the Capitol riot last month, violating the Ku Klux Klan Act. That's a bill enacted after the Civil War that prohibits people from using violence and conspiracies to keep Congress members from doing their jobs. Meanwhile, Texas Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee introduced a bill on reparations.
Now, we come from a community, a race of people that have been known as overcomers. We shall overcome, and we have overcome. Mr. Owens has eloquently spoken of the overcomers. We're successful. We believe in determination, and we believe in overcoming the many bad balls that we have been thrown. We've caught them, and we've kept on going. That is not the point of H.R. 40, the commission to study and develop reparation proposals for African Americans. For hidden in the corners of this nation are those of African American heritage, the descendants of enslaved Africans who have felt the sting of disparities. They continue to feel that sting. Now more than ever, the facts and circumstances facing our nation demonstrate the importance of H.R. 40 and the necessity of placing our nation on the path to reparative justice. That is what H.R. 40 is about. This commission will probe into the facts of the long-standing impact of disparities that slavery brought about in this country. We still experience them today. When this committee last met to discuss this legislation, we required three.
Well, Derek Johnson, the president of the NAACP, is with us now. President Johnson, we're glad to have you with us.
Good to be here.
So, President Johnson, first, your reaction to Representative Sheila Jackson Lee's comments that she just made in the soundbite before you.
Well, she's carrying the mantle that was established by Congressman John Conyers, who initially introduced H.R. 40 some 30 plus years ago. The NAACP, we've always supported H.R. 40. Congressman Conyers was a staunch supporter and member of the NAACP, and when he initially brought that bill, brought the legislation forward, many people criticized, but over time, we've seen more and more people embrace the need to adopt H.R. 40 so we can, once and for last, address the question of reparations as it relates to the harm committed against African Americans in this country.
And we as a country have been talking about reparations for decades. Do you think that this is the moment where we'll actually see action on this?
You can never predict when legislation is going to become law. There's always an effort to slow something like this down. But it's incumbent upon us as African Americans to push forward, not to doubt what could happen. No one thought that apartheid would end when it did. No one thought that segregation would end when it ended. No one thought that many of the accomplishments that we've seen as a community would have taken place when it did. But because those of us continue to fight, it happened.
So switching gears now to the lawsuit that the NAACP has filed against President Donald Trump. Talk about the significance of this lawsuit and also against Rudy Giuliani.
Well, it's important for us to hold people accountable, particularly those who commit acts of domestic terrorism, particularly if those acts is rooted in white supremacy. And that's what we've seen on January 6th. In 1871, Congress passed an act that's commonly known as the Ku Klux Klan Act to protect members of Congress for situations just like this. Southern congresspersons, senators, and congressmen during that period of time was charged with the responsibility of unifying the country after the Civil War. And there was a rise in racial hate groups, most notably the KKK. And they adopted this bill to prevent individual members from being intimidated. What we seen on January 6th was the same reality, whether it was the Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, or individuals like the former president. They pursued a course of action to prevent members of Congress from carrying out their constitutional duty around the transfer piece of government.
And Mr. Johnson, what does it say about the state of this country that a law enacted in the 1800s for the Ku Klux Klan is still relevant today and against a group of people who carry those same ideologies as the Ku Klux Klan?
Well, first of all, the unfortunate outcome of the 2016 election opened the door for this type of racial animus that we've seen over the prior 4 years, whether you're talking about Charlottesville or the massacre at the synagogue Pittsburgh, the shooting in Louisville, Kentucky, the xenophobia that would allow our country to take children from their parents, it allowed for a different level of boldness to exist around white supremacist behavior. And what happened after the election only accelerated as a result of Trump speaking from the White House and Giuliani as his henchman. This should not be the case in this country. And if we don't hold people accountable, we are only opening ourselves up for worse incidents moving into the future.
And President Johnson, tell us about how this lawsuit addresses voter disenfranchisement.
Well, this is not about voter disenfranchisement. This is narrowly focused on individuals who pursued a course of action to prevent members of Congress, black, white, from all parties, from carrying out their constitutional duties through issues of intimidations, threat, and in many cases, violence. 5 people were killed on that day. That should not be the case. And when they go to the United States Capitol with the express purpose of stopping the certification of the elections, calling for the vice president to be harmed, a person who's a member of the same party, is not even partisanship. This was an act of treason. This was an insurrection, and people must be held accountable.
What message does this lawsuit send to former President Trump?
Clearly that for African Americans specifically, but for the general public, just because a political proceeding called an impeachment did not end the way it should have, there is still accountability that must be had, whether it's through the civil lawsuit that we're filing, but I'm hoping there will also be some criminal actions brought in this case. What we seen was treason. If that was the Taliban, we would be deploying troops all across the globe to chase them down. We chased Osama bin Laden down for years before we finally caught him. Why are we not doing the same thing in this country? We must root out domestic terrorism no matter how it rears head.
Do you think the organization will be facing a long battle?
You can never predict how long anything that's in the court system will last. But we're prepared for the fight. We are an organization that's 112 years old, and we're going to be here for another 100 or some years unless we are able to eradicate racism. If we could predict when we eradicate racism, then we won't exist. But however long this case will be, we will be standing next to the principles that white supremacy should not be tolerated in this country, and it's the job of the NAACP to fight it.
Is this lawsuit intended to be largely symbolic?
Absolutely not. I mean, we're asking for damages. One of the largest groups of the KKK in the mid-'70s was sued under a similar situation, not the same act, but a similar situation. And as a result of that, they were bankrupt. The money damage created the ability to knock them out of existence. That's the goal. How do we remove the wind behind the sails of the former President Trump and all those who are aligned with him and willing to commit treason under a principle of white supremacy?
Are there any more plans for the NAACP to possibly pursue any other legal action against anybody else from the Trump administration?
We are reviewing all options that are available to ensure people are held accountable for the harm that was committed on January 6th and any other activity that we can identify. We intervened in over 34 lawsuits after the election where our votes were being challenged. So we stand here as an organization ready to fight to protect democracy and protect our community.
All right, NAACP President and CEO Derek Johnson, thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Johnson.
Thank you for the opportunity.